February 9th, 2026. A date that was supposed to mark redemption became the day everything fell apart. Millions tuned in expecting a story of triumph, a woman who walked away from royalty to build her own empire. What they witnessed instead was something far more unsettling, a public unraveling that no amount of production polish could hide. This is the story of how one documentary, one set of leaked photographs, and one unscripted moment destroyed a billion-dollar narrative years in the making, and it all happened live. The morning started like any major streaming event. Netflix had spent months promoting The Climb Within, a three-part documentary series that promised to finally tell Meghan Markle's story on her own terms. The pitch was compelling. A woman born into modest circumstances in Woodland Hills, California, who clawed her way through Hollywood's rejection, found love with a prince, and then made the ultimate sacrifice, walking away from the crown to reclaim her voice. It was supposed to be her origin story, the moment she reintroduced herself not as a duchess, not as Harry's wife, but as Meghan, the entrepreneur, the visionary, the survivor. The documentary had been in production since late 2024, carefully crafted under her production company, Archwell Media. Every frame, every interview, every piece of narration was designed to position her as a self-made force who never had a hand up, never relied on connections, and built everything from the ground up. "I didn't wait for permission," she says early in the episode, staring directly into the camera. "I created my own opportunities. No one handed me anything. I was never invited. I built my own table." It's powerful, it's rehearsed, and for a moment, it works. But then the internet started talking. Just 20 minutes into the live premiere, something unexpected happened. A set of photographs, high resolution, time-stamped, and undeniably real, began flooding social media. They weren't old tabloid shots or paparazzi ambush images. These were private photos from a 2014 yacht trip in the Mediterranean, and Meghan was in them, not as a struggling actress scraping by in Toronto, not as the woman cutting coupons and borrowing shoes for red carpets, but as a guest aboard a luxury vessel, surrounded by some of the most powerful and controversial men in the world. One image in particular stopped people cold. Meghan, smiling, seated beside Prince Andrew, his arm casually draped over her shoulder, a glass of champagne in her hand. And just a few feet away, Jeffrey Epstein. The contrast was immediate and brutal. In the documentary, Meghan had just finished describing that exact period of her life, 2014, as one of her hardest years, working 15-hour days on set, barely making rent, struggling to be seen. But the photos told a different story. Within minutes, forensic analysts on Reddit and Twitter began confirming the image's authenticity. Facial recognition software matched her features. Jewelry she wore in other public appearances from that year appeared in the photos. Even the location was verified, a private charter off the coast of Monaco. The hashtags exploded. Hashtag YachtGirlMeghan, hashtag The Climb Unravels, hashtag Duchess Exposed, and this was just the beginning. The documentary continued streaming, but by now no one was watching it the way Netflix intended. Instead, viewers were live tweeting side-by-side comparisons. Clips from the show where Meghan described her invisible years were being paired with the yacht photos. Memes started rolling in, fast, brutal, and relentless. She said she was broke. This doesn't look broke. I left royalty for authenticity after hanging out with Prince Andrew. The climb within, more like the fall without. The backlash wasn't just about the photos, it was about the narrative she'd been selling for years, the underdog story, the woman who had no help, no access, no privilege. And now, people were questioning all of it. One Reddit thread went viral within an hour, titled, "Timeline Analysis, Where Was Meghan Really in 2014?" Users began pulling up old Instagram posts, travel blogs, event photos, and even casting call records. The deeper they dug, the more inconsistencies appeared. She had claimed to be living paycheck to paycheck, but flight records suggested international travel to exclusive events. She had said she worked alone, with no mentors or connections, but her name appeared on guest lists for fundraisers attended by billionaires, diplomats, and yes, members of the royal family. It wasn't just one photo. It was a pattern, and the internet doesn't forget patterns. Behind the scenes, Netflix was in full meltdown mode. The company had invested $18 million into The Climb Within. They'd secured international distribution deals, lined up co-branded merchandise, and positioned the series as their flagship empowerment content for 2026. But within 6 hours of the broadcast, Over 1.3 million subscribers had canceled their accounts. Stock prices dropped by more than 6%, erasing nearly $4.3 billion in market value. Industry analysts were calling it the most expensive PR disaster since Cuties. Inside Netflix headquarters, executives scrambled, emergency meetings were called, legal teams were pulled in, and one question kept coming up: did she lie to us? According to leaked internal documents, Meghan's team had provided all the biographical material for the documentary themselves. Netflix hadn't independently fact-checked any of it. They'd trusted her version of events because she was a duchess, a public figure, someone whose story had already been told 1,000 times. But now, that story was crumbling. One executive was quoted in a leaked memo as saying, "We didn't just back the wrong story, we backed someone who believed she could rewrite reality with a camera crew." By the end of the day, Netflix had quietly begun pulling promotional materials from their platforms. Trailers disappeared from YouTube, Instagram posts were deleted, and behind closed doors, lawyers were reviewing every clause in their contract with Archwell Productions. The partnership that was supposed to redefine Meghan's legacy had just become her biggest liability. The documentary was always meant to end with a live Q&A session, a chance for Meghan to connect directly with viewers, answer questions, and solidify her message of resilience. But by the time she sat down on that stage, everything had changed. She knew about the photos, she knew about the backlash, and she was barely holding it together. The moderator, Asha Brandt, started with a soft question, something pre-approved about Meghan's journey and what climbing within meant to her. But Meghan didn't answer the question. Instead, she went off script. "You want to talk about climbing?" she said, her voice tight. "Let me tell you what it's like when people are pulling the rope from both ends." The room shifted, the production team froze, and Meghan kept going. "Everyone wants to paint this as privilege, like I just walked into some fairy tale and everything was handed to me. But they didn't see what I walked away from before Harry. They didn't see what I had to endure just to survive." Her words were sharp, unfiltered, and raw, and then she said something no one expected. "I was close to someone once. Someone who should have protected me. He didn't. He wasn't who I thought he was. I was naive, and I left." The silence in the studio was deafening. She was talking about Prince Andrew. For the first time, Meghan was publicly acknowledging a connection to him, not as a distant royal figure, but as someone who had been part of her life before Harry. And she didn't stop there. She turned her anger toward Catherine, the Princess of Wales. "Let's talk about Catherine," she said bitterly. "She walked into the palace with the perfect background, the right accent, the right friends, and suddenly she's the future queen. No scrutiny, no bloodthirsty press camping outside her door." Her voice cracked. "But me? I walked in and they called me a social climber, a liar, a user. And here's the truth, I knew people in that family before Catherine even showed up. The audience didn't know where to look." Then came the moment that would define everything. "I thought I was choosing love. I thought I'd found a partner. But sometimes you realize too late, you married the shadow, not the light. William always had presence. Harry followed. And I tried. I really tried. But this whole thing, this life, it was a bet I lost." 6 words that shattered everything. A bet I lost. In that instant, Meghan reduced her marriage, her royal connection, her entire public persona to a failed gamble. And the world watched it happen in real time. Social media erupted. Did Meghan just admit Harry was a consolation prize? That wasn't empowerment, that was a breakdown. She climbed and still blamed The View. Even people who had supported her through the Oprah interview, through the Spotify fallout, through years of negative press, many of them went quiet. Because this wasn't about the media twisting her words. This was her own voice, unfiltered and unguarded, saying things that couldn't be unsaid. By the next morning, the damage had spread far beyond social media. Whole Foods terminated their partnership with her upcoming lifestyle brand, Evermark, citing ongoing reputational concerns. 2 wellness startups that had co-branded her organic tea and essential oil lines withdrew from their contracts. Her fashion PR firm suspended their agreement. Talent agency Endeavor removed her from their top-tier event roster. And Netflix? They didn't just cancel the partnership. They scrubbed the entire documentary from their platform within 72 hours and issued a rare public statement about misrepresentation of material facts. Industry insiders started calling it the most expensive personal brand collapse in streaming history. but the corporate fallout was only part of the story. While the internet tore her apart and business deals evaporated, Meghan herself went completely silent. No statements, no apologies, no clarifications. Her Archwell website displayed only a maintenance banner. Her Instagram remained frozen, and her publicists stopped returning calls. Even Harry seemed to vanish. Neighbors in Montecito reported seeing him walking the estate alone, looking distant and drained. He wasn't at the Netflix studio during Meghan's interview. He wasn't by her side during the fallout. And according to sources close to the couple, he wasn't defending her anymore either. "He's devastated," one insider said. "He's quiet, and he's withdrawn. He can't keep doing this." Rumors of separation began circulating almost immediately. Meanwhile, Meghan's inner circle, once filled with stylists, strategists, spiritual advisors, and brand consultants, seemed to dissolve overnight. 2 communications directors from Archwell resigned within 72 hours. Influencers who had championed her during past controversies declined to comment. Podcast hosts who had featured her voice went silent. It was as if the entire machinery that had built and sustained her public image had simply stopped. And then came the final blow. On February 10th, at exactly 9 a.m. UK time, a quiet update appeared on the official British royal family website. Meghan Markle's dedicated biography page, previously titled The Duchess of Sussex, was removed. In its place, a single line, "No longer associated with official duties, record archived, no press release, no announcement, just absence." Later that evening, Princess Anne appeared at the Charter of Service Awards in Portsmouth. During her closing remarks, she said something that resonated far beyond the room. "Honor is not bestowed, it is sustained, and truth, even when buried, has its own way of resurfacing." The audience applauded politely. But in royal watching circles, the message was unmistakable. The crown had spoken, and it had chosen truth over silence. That same night, a memo from the Home Office leaked to the Times, confirming that King Charles's legal advisor had formally requested a review of Meghan Markle's UK visa and residency status. It wasn't an outright revocation, but it was a signal. The ties, symbolic, legal, familial, were being quietly severed. Sources close to the king said he made the decision moments after watching the clip where Meghan called Harry the shadow, not the light. There was no path back, one insider said. Not after that. William, meanwhile, refused to engage. He instructed his staff to forward all media inquiries to the palace communications office. And Catherine? She posted once, a single image of a red poppy brooch with the caption, "For those who stand in quiet truth." The contrast couldn't have been clearer. By February 11th, Meghan emerged briefly outside her Montecito estate. She wore a gray coat and oversized sunglasses. She didn't speak, she didn't wave. She walked past the cameras without acknowledgement and disappeared back inside. No entourage, no press handler, no Harry. Inside those gates, everything had gone dark. Archwell's operations were frozen. Evermark's website was offline. And the inner circle that had once buzzed with energy and ambition had scattered. Her legal team filed a single document in California, a request for formal protection of personal media assets from unauthorized biographical dramatization. Translation: she was afraid someone might tell their side of the story, perhaps even Harry. And Harry? He spent most of his days in the library, according to Montecito sources. He avoided phone calls. He paused all Archwell initiatives under his name. Multiple insiders now predicted an imminent separation, not publicly declared but privately understood. As for Meghan, rumors began circulating that she was preparing something in secret. A memoir, not written for redemption, but for revenge. Whether it will ever see the light of day remains uncertain. But one thing became painfully clear in those final days of silence. The woman who once captivated the world by saying she had no voice now found herself with no one left to hear it. What was supposed to be Meghan Markle's greatest reinvention became her most public unraveling. A documentary meant to cement her legacy instead exposed the cracks in the story she'd been telling for years. Leaked photos, corporate collapse, a live breakdown, royal rejection. It all happened within 72 hours. And when the dust settled, the world was left with a single haunting question. Who was she really? The self-made woman who built her own table? Or someone who had access all along and simply rewrote the story to fit the narrative she wanted to sell? The internet had already decided. Netflix had walked away, the royal family had closed the door. And Harry, well, Harry was still inside those Montecito gates, but whether he was standing beside her or preparing to leave remained the final mystery. Because in the end, when the curtain falls, not with applause but with silence, that's when the story truly ends. And this story? It ended the moment she said those 6 words. It was a bet I lost.